Okay, now we have some time for questions and answers. Our first question for tonight goes, Dear Ajahn, thanks for the talk. I realized that happiness cannot exist without sadness. They both are relative terms. We like the weekend as we have the working week. So in our mind, we resist certain things to maintain sadness. And then we grasp certain things to get some happiness. As opposed to both of these, I managed to accept both thoughts equally, at least in meditation. Then peace is there on both occasions, and it is not discriminatory. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, that sounds like a good understanding. I think the challenge is to keep that up, in all the different situations. By the way, if you become a monk, weekends and weekdays just blur into one another because you work every day, you keep your precepts every day, you meditate every day, you teach every day. So it's a bit different from the lay life. At least lay life, you get your weekends. But the idea is to keep this non-discriminatory awareness, keep the equanimity, the mindfulness going at all times in all situations, and that's the challenge. We have to face the 8 worldly winds: praise and blame, gain and loss, status, loss of status, pleasure and pain. These 4 pairs of experience are constantly blowing onto us, good and bad, positive, negative, all the time. So they're constantly testing our equanimity, our mindfulness, and this is why we have to keep coming back to the practice over and over again. We would all like to just do the practice once and be done with it. Sit back and relax. Just like, you'd like to go and do your job and then come home and you just want to sit back and relax and never have to go again. We'd like to earn enough money so we can do that. We'd like to have enough peace of mind that we don't have to practice anymore. But actually, we have to be vigilant. One of the qualities of the Buddhist practice, the Buddhist teaching, is heedfulness, vigilance, appamada. So it sounds like you understand what you have to do, but you just have to keep doing it in different situations, and you never know what's around the corner. Sometimes unexpected good and bad things turn up. So you have to be vigilant, heedful, keep coming back to the practice. Keep your mind coming back to the deathless, this quality of mindfulness in the present moment, the deathless, so that you can face these different worldly winds that blow from each side, each direction.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Is it normal to not feel fear when contemplating death? I often reflect on my own mortality without fear. Am I not giving it enough thought or taking it too lightly?
Good question. I think you have to ask yourself that. It's possible you're not yet going very deep into what death is, and so no fear has been stimulated. Or it's possible, I don't know you, but it's possible you've contemplated it often, you brought it up often to the point where you are very familiar with the idea that one day you won't be here, this body will die out for some reason, everything that you love and like you'll be separated from. You may have contemplated that so much, so often, that you are very familiar with it and quite used to it. That's possible as well. So you have to look at your own background, your own experience. But sometimes some of our mental defilements, some of these deeper emotions, they're just sitting there and they haven't yet been triggered because you just haven't encountered the situation. Can be, things like grief and sadness when someone passes away, or your own fear of your own death, And it's only when you get the news that you have a life-threatening disease, or you're in a situation where the airplane is plunging, or the car is careering off the road, or whatever, hopefully none of these things happen, but it's only when you've experienced the life-threatening situation that fear, deep fear, is triggered, perhaps. So you never know. But the Buddha said, be vigilant, keep reflecting on the impermanence of life every day to spur you on in your practice, to make you really understand life better. He said, when we don't reflect on death, it's as if we're dead already, because we're not understanding that life is impermanent. So we tend to pursue a lot of foolish things, do foolish things, frivolous pursuits, waste a lot of time thinking about things that are not very helpful, or doing things that are not very helpful. We tend to be heedless when we don't reflect on death. Whereas when we do remind ourselves of death, it makes us pay more attention to how we spend our time, what's important, and so on. And it tends to give more meaning to life. So you have to ask yourself that, how deeply you've gone into your reflection on death, I don't know. But it's quite possible you've become much more equanimous towards the idea of death, which is good. That's means you're much more familiar with the whole theme and idea of impermanence. That's a good thing. That's the direction we have to take, isn't it? The Buddha said, reflect on death every day. And if it's not bringing up any fear, well, good. That makes it easier. But if you want to test yourself, go and do something like, monks go and stay in graveyards and cemeteries and charnel grounds, and they sometimes, if you get the news that you've got ill, sit up and meditate with that illness. If it's one that was potentially life-threatening, just sit with it, meditate on it to see whether you do have any fear that you haven't noticed, and so on. There's always more we can do in the practice, so keep investigating, keep asking the questions, keep looking and learning from your experience. Don't just assume that you understand death and you have no more fear. Don't assume that. There's that story of the monk who thought he was enlightened, and he thought he had no more fear. And off he went into the forest, telling his teacher, he left his teacher saying, I'm beyond fear now, I'm enlightened, nothing can sway my mind, nothing can affect me. And the teacher said, oh, okay, off you go. So he went off to stay out in a secluded forest. And the teacher used his psychic powers to manifest an elephant and sent this elephant into the forest, and it charged the monk who was sitting in meditation. And as the elephant charged him, fear arose. He'd never been in a situation before that had brought up fear, but seeing this large elephant running towards him, fear did arise, and he knew, I'm still attached, I'm still not enlightened. And then the next thought was, I bet this elephant has come from my teacher, because this is like a test, isn't it? He worked that out. And so the elephant dissolved because it was a mind-made elephant, but the monk had got the teaching. He realized he was still attached to his body and mind, his life. He hadn't seen that, and so fear had arisen. So fear can be like that. It can pop up when we're not expecting it, because normally we're at ease in ourselves. That's good. That's our merit, isn't it? If we're happy, content, that's good. But sometimes fear will pop up unexpectedly, or it'll be triggered by an unusual situation. So we have to maintain vigilance.
Sadhu Lungpo. Another question. My friends are unjustly imprisoned due to their family's political involvement. I want to write them letters to provide hope and strength. Which sutta would be appropriate to share with them?
Well, the first 10 or 20 suttas of the Majjhima Nikaya are all very good for encouraging practice. So if someone is imprisoned, they have to deal with that everyday confinement and their own mental states coming up because of the confinement. They may feel they're unjustly imprisoned as well, but just being in prison forces you back on yourself. So there's a lot in those first suttas of the Majjhima Nikaya that can really help you with practice. So like Anapanasati Sutta, Satipatthana Sutta may be very useful. They're very straightforward, but they can really be applied. Say you're confined in a prison cell, there's a chance to do, hopefully. I know a prison's not always ideal because of noise and the surrounding people, but if there's a chance to practice mindfulness, maybe some meditation and just reflection on turning attention inwards to find real happiness inside. So I think the first suttas of the Majjhima Nikaya would be quite useful. Also, stories like the Dhammapada verses and their background stories. They're really good books to read because they're both informative, inspiring, bring up, and you can compare. Like, there are stories where the Buddha or the Bodhisattva was facing obstacles, difficulties, challenges, and those Dhammapada stories, the background stories, just give inspiring, insights into the practice, developing patience, overcoming the difficulties, such as somebody who was in prison, say. Those two things, the Majjhima Nikaya, the first 10 or 20 suttas, any of those would be good. And then the Dhammapada, say, the Dhammapada verses with their background stories. They're very useful as well. And maybe that's a book you could send into the prison if they allow it. I don't know if they allow it, but if they do, that would be good.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. As a Buddhist, I've learned to cope with discontent in life and during meditation. In the context of a relationship that may no longer be working, how does one discern when it's time to persevere despite the difficulties, akin to enduring pain during meditation, or when it's time to make a change and move on?
Well, that's something you have to assess for yourself, don't you? In whether you're talking about a relationship or just in meditation, sometimes we have to pause and consider our situation. So if it's meditation, if you're sitting there with a lot of pain, you may pause and consider, can I maintain any mindfulness with this level of pain? So you might ask yourself, what level of pain am I enduring here? Is it, sometimes we use the 1 to 10 scale, is it a 3, a 5? Maybe I can cope with that, so I'll carry on meditating as I have been. Or if it's up to 8 or 9, you might say, this is a time for a change of posture. So you may do walking meditation as opposed to sitting, or a change of object. If you can't stay with the breath, too much pain, maybe move over to a metta meditation or a reflection on impermanence. I'm just giving you examples here, but sometimes you assess what you're facing in your meditation and whether you need to change your approach at that time. And sometimes you will, sometimes you can just carry on, but you have to be the one who assesses it and considers what the best thing to do. And the same with a relationship, isn't it? If you've been in a relationship a long time and it's not going so well, maybe think it through. What are the positives of this relationship? What are the negatives? What would I lose if I lose this relationship? What do I gain from the relationship? Weigh it up, balance it up, giving it some, we say, reasoned reflection or wise consideration, rather than just reacting. What we tend to do is just react. I hate this, I like that. These reactions are not feeding much insight or understanding. They tend to just feed kilesa, more attachment to what we like and what we don't like. where you're trying to bring up mindfulness and reflect in a reasoned way on your experience. So, if you've been living with someone, if it's not going well, just think it through. What have I gained from living with them? What good things have come? What good things are still there? What bad things have come? What bad things are there? Weigh it up and see, hopefully the good can outweigh the bad, but you have to do that, don't you? You have to go through that process. And this is what we call giving reasoned reflection to your experience, say your experience of a relationship, married life or a relationship. It's what you have to do, rather than just reacting with emotion all the time.
Sadhu Lumpur. Are there any more questions? You're welcome to raise your hand, digital hand, or send it through the chat box. Otherwise, we may finish the session there.
Nice talking to you, meeting you again this week. The next couple of weeks we're taking a break because I won't be near a computer screen. So you'll get notice through the Facebook or other ways on the website and so on of when Zoom talks will start again, but it'll be at the end of July. So anyway, for the moment, we wish you well with your practice. May you be peaceful, may you be safe, happy.